Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I hope you're well. Today, I'm going to be talking about a system that I've developed primarily for small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, that aims to get you up to about 15 times return on investment on your marketing spend. So we're talking about running campaigns where, for example, you would spend £1,000. I'm here in the UK. Obviously, translate this to dollars if you're in America. You'd spend £1,000 and then get up to £15,000 back for these campaigns. So it's a very lofty objective, but this can work. I'm going to run through the system that I use, how it works, and obviously the key thing is I'm going to touch on why it can be so successful in terms of the amount of return on investment that it gets back for you. So look, if you're anything like me, a small business owner, you're probably very busy. I'm just going to jump straight in. I'm going to try and keep this down to about 30 minutes or less. I'm going to be talking quite fast as well, just to whiz through this. I really want to give you as much information about my system and about how it works and what it might be able to do for your business as I can, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's just jump straight in. So I just wanted to touch quickly on who I am, my experience, and how I've come about sort of getting into this particular form of marketing, and why I kind of went into it and why I find it so sort of rewarding, I guess. So I've got about 20 years experience in marketing. I founded my company that I do this through Plasmic Marketing several years ago, and then really, although I've got lots of hands-on experience in virtually all kinds of marketing that I've acquired over the years, I've pretty much done it all. I was really looking for a way a few years ago to sort of stand out from the crowd, and it was really about this return on investment thing. I've always been very focused on how much money my campaigns get back. I was regularly achieving sort of 4 or 5 times return on investment, but I wanted more. So I was looking around for different ways, different techniques and systems and types of campaigns that I could run that would ideally, when I started out, I was looking to get sort of 10 times return on investment, maybe 15 as I got better at it. And this was the thing that really stood out. So really a few years ago, I started learning about word of mouth marketing and systems of specifically developing content that were based around word of marketing principles. It's all about sort of baking in principles into your content, which give it a much better chance of getting talked about, both online and offline, getting shared a lot, and basically going viral. I got really interested in this, and then when I started trying it, I started getting good results. It started working, so I'm now sort of specializing in that area, and I do other marketing as well, but primarily my focus is on this kind of content and running these kinds of high ROI campaigns that are based around word of mouth, social sharing, and referrals. So yeah, I mean, I've always tried to be innovative and forward thinking, and this is just really a sort of natural extension of that, really. And it is all about results with me. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. If I was working with you, I'd be aiming to get at least to start with 8 or 10 times return on what you spend. So if you spent £1,000 on a campaign, trying to get £10,000 back that's attributable to these campaigns and this content that I produce with you. So I'm going to delve into specifics about how I go about doing that in just a second. Just wanted to clarify what I'm really referring to when I kind of talk about word of mouth content. So it's basically like regular content that if you're a small business owner, you've probably already produced. So it's not massively different from regular videos and Facebook posts, ebooks, PDF downloads, that kind of things, but it's just better. And really the reason that it's better is that it has firstly a strong emphasis on video content, and video, as I'm sure you're aware, is the most sort of engaging, most compelling form of media that we have, really. So I think all things being equal, we'd all agree that putting video content out there or expressing an idea or a concept in the form of video is probably more powerful than, for example, the written word. But the really key thing is that what we do is we brainstorm content ideas, as you might do normally, and then I run them through a matrix which basically cross-references all of our content ideas against 6 principles. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit of detail in a minute. I'm going to run through each of the 6 principles. But basically, these are scientifically proven principles, 6 of them, as to why content gets massively talked about, both online and offline, and shared around. And this has all come about, I mean, perhaps the most important thing to know about this is that these concepts, these principles, were originally developed by a guy, Jonah Berger, who's kind of half marketer, half scientist, and he actually spent 10 years with a team scientifically looking at content. I think about 2,500 pieces of content that were specifically, well, they went viral. Basically, they got massive amounts of views. You know, if it was a YouTube video online, they were getting sort of 2, 3, maybe 5 million views. They got lots and lots of shares, lots of comments and engagement on the various social media channels where they appeared. And he wanted to find out, you know, what is it specifically about all of those pieces of content that went massively viral and made the companies like loads of money that had produced, you know, where her company had produced that content to try and you know, drive people to their site and get revenue. What was it about that content specifically that had created that virality and made everybody talk about it and share it? And he basically, after 10 years, him and his team came up with these 6 principles. So that's the system that I've sort of worked to. I've ingrained those principles into what I do when I work with you, and I'm going to run you through those and talk about, you know, how that works. Just to clarify, I sort of touched on this before, but you know, really, I like to work with smaller size companies. So in terms of who my services are best aimed at, hopefully, you know, this is you if you're on this webinar now, or you're listening to the recording. So, you know, ideally you would be a company turning over between about 50,000 and 200,000 pounds. So, you know, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but that's really kind of my sweet spot. And the reason for that is that, you know, in order to really make this work quickly and effectively, there's got to be a little bit of budget there to actually produce the content. So, you know, for example, you're probably going to need, you know, at least a couple of £1,000 to actually produce the content. Once we've brainstormed the ideas, we've run it through the matrix, we shortlist 3 or 4 videos or pieces of content to support it that we think are going to work really, really well. Obviously, there's got to be a little bit of budget there from your side to actually produce that content. So the return on investment can be massive. It can be 10, 15 times what you spend, but you know, typically you'd have to have a good couple of £1,000 to invest in producing that content in the first place. Maybe in some cases less, but that's really the reason why it's not so applicable. You know, if you're literally just starting up and say, for example, you know, your budget for marketing is like £100 or £200, this is probably not going to be right for you. But hopefully, you know, you're a little bit more established and you've got a little bit more money initially to spend on the basis that we're looking to get a big return on investment on the content. Okay, so I think the other thing I would really say as well, apart from, you know, just talking about the money side of things, is that, you know, as a business owner, if you're making the decisions here in terms of working with me, you know, you have to be like a little bit creative. You've got to be kind of willing to experiment a little bit and try new things. So, you know, whilst this is a scientifically proven method, my system and principles are based on science and you know, years of study about, you know, what makes this work and this kind of content, you know, really create a huge buzz and get, you know, the word out to lots and lots of people about your company. A part of it is a little bit of experimentation. So, for example, what we normally do is we normally, you know, from hundreds of initial ideas from our brainstorming together, we normally select 3 or 4 of those ideas or concepts. And then, you know, often we're not quite sure which one of those is going to work the best. So it's a case of, you know, investing a little bit of time, money and resources in producing 3 or 4 bits of content, you know, putting them all out there and experimenting a bit and seeing which one of those takes off. So I've touched on a little bit of information about my system using these 6 key principles. So just to run through what they are in order: social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. So don't worry about sort of taking too much of those names in at the moment. I'm going to run through those specifically one by one in a second. But as a general rule, just keep in mind as we go through these 6 principles, what we're really aiming for in terms of cross-referencing our brainstorming content ideas through my system matrix is we're looking to try and incorporate at least 3 of the 6 principles into the shortlisted pieces of content that we produce and the campaigns that we produce. So very, very important. You don't have to have all 6 of them. So as we go through, if you think, well, how on earth am I going to produce content that incorporates all 6 of these? Well, the key thing is you don't actually have to. So you're generally looking to sneak 3 principles in there. That's kind of the sweet spot. If you can get 4 in, even 5, then fantastic. But generally, if you've got 3, then because it's scientifically proven, there's a very, very good chance that that content is going to get heavily talked about, heavily shared amongst your target audience. So that's really the sweet spot, is trying to get 3 principles incorporated into the content. And just an interesting fact I wanted to mention, which is probably relevant at this point, is again talking about word of mouth. 80% of word of mouth still, even to this day, with everything that has been developed online with the internet, still takes place offline. So that's a really sort of important vision to get in your head when I'm talking about generating a buzz for your company and your products and services and getting people talking. The vision that you should have is really, perhaps a couple of women chatting in their living room or in a coffee shop over a cup of tea or coffee. Maybe a couple sort of out walking, or friends out walking, going into a bar, just sitting in the park having a few drinks or whatever. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about generating massive word of mouth. Is those group conversations that happen between people offline. So obviously then ideally, when your product, your service, your company gets mentioned, the idea is that somebody mentions it and then the other person shows an interest, and then perhaps the person who has mentioned it gets their phone out and actually shows them your video or something on your website if it's another piece of supporting content. But the initial word of mouth, 80% of that is taking place offline. It's an interesting statistic. It's a surprising one. When it was surprising for me when I found it out a few years ago. It's probably quite surprising for you, but that literally is where pretty much all the conversations take place about content, companies, products, services, what's going on. It's pretty much all during those offline conversations. So let's get into the actual principles. So principle 1 is social currency, and this is all about making people look good if they follow and engage with your company. So it's giving people a way to sort of get status, impress others, and the idea is obviously by engaging with your content and then taking some sort of action, you want to give people a reason to actually show that off and let people know that they're engaging with your content, using your products and services in some way. So this is all about the fact that people crave status. Obviously, we're all human. We all want to some extent show off and look good to others, obviously some more than others, but even at a basic level, that we're always looking for ways that we can sort of impress our friends or partners, people we're trying to woo, family members. So this is really about thinking creatively and strategically about how you can put content in front of people that they are going to want to show to other people. So example here would be, and there are many examples of companies and brands doing this, would be getting some kind of exclusive club or group going that people can join. So if somebody gets introduced to your brand, your company, or buys one of your products or services, this is the primary reason, or one of the key reasons why you'll know from your own experience, often people get put into exclusive clubs, they get exclusive offers or discounts. Part of the reason that works psychologically is that you're actually making those customers or potential customers part of a group that is seen as quite exclusive, and it adds that status. okay, that's great for them, but they also automatically want to tell others about that. If there's some sort of kudos, like if you think about somebody joining like an exclusive members club where only members are allowed in to drink, or some sort of venue, people naturally want to tell other people about that. They don't want to just keep it to themselves. They want to sort of impress others by telling them that, yeah, I'm a member of that group. I can get in. You can't. It's very exclusive. There's only a few hundred members, that kind of thing. So that's really the key principle with how this number one principle, social currency, works. And a lot of it as well is about making the prospects feel special, making them feel like they've got access to inside information as well. So that's a really, really key part of this number one principle, social currency. So again, with all these principles, I have specific sort of ways that I kind of look to take ideas that we've brainstormed and actually develop them so that these principles end up being sort of ingrained into the content. So principle number 2 is triggers. So this one is all about trying to find ways to create a link between your company and your products and services and something else that is naturally occurring all the time in the sort of natural environment of your target audience. So the best way to explain this is if we think about linking a company and their products and services to a specific object in the environment of a target audience. So the idea is that, if you think about it, it's quite logical. If you create that link, if somebody watches your content and you've strategically done something to create a link between your message, your idea, your concept, or a particular product or service that you're promoting, if you link that to an object that they're going to features heavily in their natural environment, whether that's at home or going to work, the idea is that every time they then see that object in their environment going forward, they think about your advert, they think about your piece of content, and in turn they then think about your company, your brand, and the message and what you were selling. So an example that I always use just to illustrate this, the Kit Kat campaign, which originally started in the 1980s, is a very, very good one. So Kit Kat clearly way ahead of their time here. And this was sort of like mid to late 1980s. So I'm in the UK here. For anybody who's not, I'm not sure if you would be aware of these adverts. They're extremely famous here in the UK. I'm not sure if they ran in America or any other countries, but basically the concept of the campaign, which was hugely successful, was it created this very, very strong link between Kit Kat, which is a chocolate bar here in the UK made by Nestle, and taking a break and having a cup of tea and coffee. So, this was massively pushed, even right down to the slogan. The slogan was, have a break, have a Kit Kat. And to many people, that might seem like, just a fun slogan, but there's actually a much, much more powerful thing going on here. And it's based on this principle number 2 of triggers. So the whole campaign created a very, very strong direct link between taking a break during your day, having a cup of tea and coffee, and having a Kit Kat. So how that worked in practice was literally millions of people, once they'd seen the advert, maybe 2, 3, or 5 times, whenever during their day, like almost every single day, whenever they took a break and they put the kettle on to make a cup of tea and coffee, the thought of Kit Kat was triggered in their head. They started to associate taking a break and having a tea or coffee with actually having a Kit Kat bar. And okay, obviously they weren't necessarily having a Kit Kat every single day, but it was constantly reminding of them. So the results speak for themselves. I mean, this was a massively successful campaign, and sales of Kit Kats literally generated, I think, probably 10 times more revenue in the next 12 months when the campaign was released for Nestle. It was hugely successful, and a massive part of it was the fantastic way in which the person who conceived this campaign created that trigger. I mean, it absolutely worked brilliantly. So, this is what you're looking to do for your, as part of your campaign, is you're looking to create a link. So between what you're selling, your message, and something in the environment. So, as I'm talking now, think about your target audience, think about who you're targeting, and then think about what objects appear in their environment. So it's probably going to work a little bit better if it's something a little bit unique to your specific target audience. So if you think about, for example, a particular segment of customers you're targeting who do a certain job or a certain type of work, maybe they're like an engineer or a creative type, like a graphic designer or something. What are the specific things you would brainstorm that are occurring, the specific objects that appear in their environment all the time that you could link to? And if it is a little bit unique, it works a little bit better. I can't go into massive amounts of detail about this, otherwise this webinar would go on for sort of 5 or 6 hours. But the basic principles here are, the real sweet spot for the trigger is something that is appearing ideally every day or every few days in their environment that would trigger the correct response. But you also really want it to be something that nobody else has really created a link to. So, if you choose something that there are already maybe 5 or 6 things that are inherently linked to that object, it's not going to work as well for obvious reasons. When they see that object, it's going to be a bit confusing. If 5 or 6 things are related strongly to it and linked, then they're not always going to think about your content, your campaign, your brand and your products and services. But if you're pretty much the only thing that is linked to that object in their environment, then that's much more powerful. There's not really any noise. It's really just you kind of with that strong link that they're going to think of. Okay, so yeah, something to think about there. I mean, there's a few things that obviously should get your creative juices flowing as I walk through, but the key thing there is think about what unique items appear in the everyday environment of your target audience, and what are the obvious things that you could link to. So that's triggers. So principle number 3 is emotion. So a quick overview of this one is that, generally speaking, all other things being equal, your content is always going to be much more effective, and it's going to stand a much better chance of being heavily shared and talked about online and offline if there's some form of strong emotion incorporated into the content. So again, if we think about video, it can work well to have a video that's quite kind of almost a little bit bland emotionally and just very, very factual. But if you can ingrain specific emotions at the same time as imparting very, very useful, factual information across to people, then the combination of the factual stuff and the emotion is going to work much better. So getting even more specific, I mean, this is all stuff that's come out in this 10 years of scientific study, and since that, it's not just about getting emotion into your content. There are actually 5 emotions that have been identified as working the best. So you can see those on the screen now. Those 5 emotions are awe, excitement, amusement, or humor, however you want to term it, making people laugh basically, and then anger and anxiety. So the basic principle is that, for the short list running through my system and matrix, we might have lots and lots of ideas, but we'd be thinking about, okay, what ideas for the content are going to generate at least one of those 5 emotions. So it doesn't really matter too much which one of those 5 emotions you generate. You'll see that the first 3 are positive, or excitement, amusement, humor. The final 2, anger and anxiety, are negative. So it can be just as effective to actually instigate those negative emotions out of anger and anxiety in people. That works as well. Generally, most people tend to feel that it seems to make more sense to go for the 3 positive emotions. But the negative side of things does work well as well. So the most important thing is that you're trying to get 1 or 2 of those emotions into your content. So, really questions that you should be asking yourself here are, what's awe-inspiring about your products and services? Think about what you do, how you help people, and then think about, maybe a video that you could create for 2 or 3 minutes. How can you make that awe-inspiring? How can you, talk about something that is going to inspire one of these 5 emotions in people. Think about upcoming news and events that are going on. Perhaps if you're developing new products or services, will talking about any of those naturally inspire any of these 5 emotions, or is there a way that you can describe what you're doing to people that would, create any of those 5 emotions in them? So it's all about thinking of different ways that you can present your ideas and your products, maybe in a funny, humorous way, maybe looking at customer stories, going a little bit deeper, interviewing customers, and really kind of looking at how what you do as a company and your products and services have really changed people's lives. Sometimes I guess we all get a bit wrapped up in just fairly brutally trying to increase sales, but perhaps don't think a little bit enough about how is each sale impacting the customer, how is it affecting their lives, how is it helping them. So it's all about really sort of delving into those stories, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute in another one of the principles, and really looking how you're helping people. You've got to get emotion into your content. Okay, so moving on to the next principle, which is public. So this one obviously really important as well. This is all about making your brand and the products and services that you sell, and also your content and ideas, more visible to as many people as possible out in the real world. So again, it's all about what happens offline. And the basic concept here is that for this to work as well as possible, people really need to be able to see when other people just like them preferably are using your products or services. So it's all about how can you do that. And if it's not obvious just from what your products or service actually is that it's your company and your brand that's selling it, then it's all about how can you show off your brand specifically, how can you make it really, really clear that whatever product or service or item a person is using, how can you make it clear that it's actually come from your company and your brand and not that of a rival or competitor? That's what this is all about. So the key things that you should be asking yourself here, if you've got a product or service, think about ways in which you can get your customers who already have purchased and own and use your products and services. How can you get them displaying the fact that they're using those products and services more visibly and more prominently when they're out and about, whether that's like work or play, whether they're working during the day, they're out socially, if they're using and consuming your products and services. How can you make that clearer to all of the people that they come into contact around them, that are in the same place at them at any given time, basically. So there are some sort of initial obvious ways that you can do this. It's based on, if you think about it, the way that many companies have looked to sort of employ this principle over many years. So it's normally focused on things like making products and services, particular colors, maybe brand colors, making the coloring sort of more striking. If you think about the Lance Armstrong cancer wristbands, which were hugely successful, they were a very, very bright yellow color. Now, there was a very specific reason why they made them bright yellow. First of all, it was very bright. It was extremely visible in terms of the color. No matter where you were, it probably stood out more than almost any other color they could have produced those wristbands in. But also, creating something in such a bright yellow was quite unusual. It's not the most common color for any item or product or brand to be made in, or any brand to use. So it was a little bit unusual for the most part, even from a huge distance, quite far away. If somebody kind of saw those yellow bands on someone's wrist, it was very, very clear exactly what it was and what it stood for. So another really good example as well, if you've got any interest in fashion at all, you've probably noticed I think about several years ago, on many items of their clothing, Ralph Lauren made the logo, the emblem. If you think about the polo shirts they're famous for, used to be very, very small, and they actually increased. I think they made it 8 times bigger. So I'm quite a keen golfer. I know that a lot of golfers on tour are actually sponsored in some way by Ralph Lauren, and that emblem, that logo for them that can be seen on their clothing is absolutely enormous. And there's actually other few examples of similar brands, fashion brands, who followed suit and have actually increased the size of their logo massively. So Lacoste is another one. And again, you would think that, I guess it's a very simple change. They're literally just making the logo, a lot bigger so that it's much more visible. You can see exactly what it is from much further away. But think about the wider principle that's actually following, and how you can kind of transfer that into your own company if you're not a fashion brand with a logo that you're printing on clothing. It's about ways in which you can make your brand and the fact that products and services are designed, developed, marketed and sold by you more clear to people. So how can you get people noticing clearly that other people like them are using your products, even from quite a long distance away. It's all about them noticing, even if they're not sat right next to the other person. Another good example here is what Apple have done with their laptops. There was a huge argument about them, which way up to have their logo. You'll notice at the moment that it's a certain way up when somebody opened their laptop. It's actually the right way up when people look at the laptop. So there was a huge debate about whether it should be the other way round, effectively upside down compared to how it is now. And I think that went on for months in the company. But again, it's all about, when somebody's using an Apple laptop, a MacBook Pro like I am now, who should see that logo the right way up? Should it be the person who's using the laptop, or the other people who are actually witnessing the people using the laptop? And they actually went for the latter, which is it should be the right way up when people see people using the device, because of this public principle. Moving on to practical value. So this is all about crafting content that is really useful to the people in your target audience. So people share content and information because it helps them, and then it can also help others as well. So people have this massive inclination to help other people, and you can really tap into that that desire for people to help others by really feeding them and giving them content and information in your content that is not only useful to them, but they know are going to be useful to other people. That's really, really going to motivate them to want to tell other people about your content and about the information that it contains, and pass it on and send it to them, or even get their phone out and show them the video there and then if they're meeting friends, family and work colleagues. So the key thing is try and think about how you can produce content based on what your company does that really genuinely helps people. What are the most useful, helpful, valuable resources and information that you can actually give to people, and they're going to want to pass, much of the time they're going to want to pass that information on. They're going to want to actually help other people that they care about if they know that the information is also going to be useful to other people that they know as well. So one of the things that I really try and draw out as we're working through these ideas and developing the short list of ideas through the system and the matrix is I'm really trying to think about how your company and your products and ideas save people time and money, and actually just make their life easier. Those are often the biggest motivations that work most effectively. What is it about what you do and what you offer that is actually going to improve the lives of people and make it easier? And again, if people experience that that's what's happened with them in their own lives, then generally there's always a natural desire and motivation to want to actually tell other people about these experiences and about how your products and services have helped them. And actually, so it's about them wanting to ensure that other people that they care about also get the same benefits from your working with your company and or consuming your products and services as well. So very obvious things to do to start with are giving your prospects and customers things like useful tips, guidance. Traditionally you would think about producing a video, 5 tips, 10 tips, that can help you do such and such, depending on what your company does. It might be also some supporting sort of PDF downloads as well, ebooks, maybe kind of case studies, white papers, talking about tips and guidance and various things that can make you do something related to your what your company does more effectively. But just it's all about trying to make sure that you're really helping people and giving them super useful information that can help them and other people that they know as well. And yeah, as you're probably sort of gathering, it's all about really highlighting incredible value that you offer as well. So it is thinking a little bit more strategically, not just about the actual core product or service that you're offering, but again, what incredible value does that actually give to people's lives? How are people's lives actually going to be improved when they purchase your products and services? And really trying to tap into that value and making that really clear. If you're not doing that already, you may be doing it to a certain extent. You may be doing it very well, but again, you might be sort of kind of doing that in other forms, but not really strategically putting that into actual content. An example that I kind of always use for this, it's one that I think everybody can relate to, is there's a few companies that for many years have been producing email newsletters that have got huge followings. They've built up massive email lists, and they basically just bang out an email newsletter, normally like every week or every month. It's often every week, and it just contains such great advice, such great knowledge and expertise that most people are literally waiting with anticipation every week for the email to come into their inbox. It's, say for example, it gets sent every Friday morning at 9 o'clock. If a lot of people on the email list actually kind of have that plugged in their brains as a time when they're going to reserve sort of 5 or 10 minutes or something to have a look through the latest email that's come through, and if there's always something really useful to them that helps them either in their personal life or the job contained in that email content, they literally can't wait for the next one, and they're going to want to consume it. And the key thing about these things are that they tend to get very heavily shared as well. So my own experiences, and I'm sure you can think of some experiences as well, where you've subscribed to, for example, an email newsletter for a number of years. You think about how many times you've passed at least something from that email newsletter on, if it's weekly, to maybe your partner, your friends, family, people that would be interested in it. When you kind of develop a piece of content like that regularly, it tends to start getting very heavily shared. So I'm sure you can think of examples of where that's been the case with you. And again, every time that gets shared, it's a kind of a cumulative effect as well. What tends to happen is if there's regularly really strong content in an emails newsletter, yes, somebody might share it with 4 people, but then 3 of those 4 people might share it with another 15 people combined, and it just kind of like spans out, and that's how you get your virality, and that's how you get ultimately your return on investment with taking a piece of content that you originally emailed to, say 1,000 people on your email list. If that ends up getting in front of 50,000, 100,000 or 500,000 people, then that's how we can create this kind of up to 15 times return on investment. So that's the principle behind practical value. It's all about this one, trying to get enough value into the content that you're producing where people just literally can't resist sharing it with others. They just feel compelled to share it with others because they just kind of think, I know that's going to help so and so so much that I'd feel a little bit guilty if I don't pass it on, basically. Final principle number 6 is stories. This is a really important one. I'm sure we can all relate to this. So this is all about wrapping up your marketing messages into some kind of story narrative. So the thing to think about here is, as I've kind of gone through this might have kind of sparked you to think about quite a few content ideas, things that you may have been thinking about doing for sort of content, videos or whatever in your company already. But those are just basic ideas. Probably think about how you can start to wrap those ideas and concepts up into actual stories that people want to tell. So the basic concept here is that the way this works is that if you just put some content out there that just invites people to advertise your products and services, or a particular deal that you're doing, okay, that might be quite useful, but people can often feel a little bit uncomfortable talking to their friends or family or colleagues about just literally saying, oh, why don't you check out this offer, it's 50% off, or they're doing sort of buy one get one free, or they've got a new product. It can often, although it can be useful, it can often be a little bit too salesy. People are very sort of conscious of just straight up recommending products and services. I mean, for example, if you don't know that other person all that well, people might sort of think that maybe you're getting some sort of commission or kickback, or some sort of affiliate, the payment or something. So it can be a bit uncomfortable just telling people about products and services and offers. So the one thing that people will do though is that they'll happily kind of tell stories that are a little bit more subtle and have a little bit more kind of content substance to them than just talking about a product or an offer or a deal that your company's promoting. So this is the kind of the concept of trying to think about how you can wrap your content and your campaigns up into stories. So the thing to think about here then as I'm talking is, how can you find interesting stories from your customers or from inside your company, or that related to your products and services, that you can create narratives that you can kind of wrap your product and your service and your offer up in. So you're really looking to sort of embed your ideas and your products and services that you're offering into a longer story. And the really key thing is that you want to get something, and this is how it works best, where the person who's telling the story cannot tell that story without mentioning your product and service. So if you think about this logically, there would be examples of where somebody could tell a story, but if you haven't quite done this right and quite nailed it, there might be absolutely no need for them to sort of say, well, mention your brand or your company, or at the end of the story, if the person or the people that are hearing the story don't have to sort of say, oh, where's this come from? Where did you find this? Who's produced this content or this video? If there's no actual reason for people to ask that, then it's not going to be as effective. So a really good example that I've cited here of how this was done quite brilliantly was with Subway sandwiches, which I'm sure you've heard of. So they actually did some content about how a guy had lost around about 10 stone by eating nothing but Subway sandwiches. And there was some blog posts that they did. They did a video on this guy, and the reason that worked so brilliantly was that there was an amazing, awe-inspiring story behind the content. You remember earlier in the principle about emotions, I mentioned that awe is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful emotion to inject in your content. Well, they did this incredibly awe-inspiring content about how this guy had this miserable existence. He was like massively obese, and then he managed to lose 10 stone, I think, in about 14 months, maybe a year and a half. And then the content was, looked into how he'd actually lost all that weight, which was completely life transforming. And it was actually the fact that the guy had almost eaten nothing but Subway sandwiches for pretty much a year and a half. So the reason that this is so effective is that you could tell the story, oh, did you hear about the guy that lost 10 stone? But at some point, everybody hearing the story is always going to say, well, how did he do it? How on earth did he manage to lose all this weight in such a short period of time? And then, of course, at that point, you have to say, oh, believe it or not, it was by eating Subway sandwiches. So, it was very, very powerful and effective because the story couldn't really be told without mentioning Subway and the brand. And the really clever thing, which is another important concept to get your head around and to ingrain in the content, is that you want the story ideally to actually showcase the particular qualities of your company and your products and service that is really important to get across to potential customers. So again, relating it to the Subway example, either very directly or subconsciously, what this the message that this gets across about Subway sandwiches is that, firstly, it was possible for this guy to actually eat a Subway sandwich every single day, so they must be quite tasty. They can't be absolutely disgusting if he managed to have one literally every day for over a year, and also that they're healthy as well. So people kind of think, okay, well, this guy lost all this weight, 10 stone, by eating nothing pretty much but Subway sandwiches, then they must be like really healthy. So those two kind of messages, even on a subconscious level, were kind of ingrained about Subway sandwiches and what they do into that piece of content. And this is why it worked so brilliantly. So just talking a little bit about, general reasons why wrapping your ideas and your content up into these stories works so well is it's just really the power of stories. They're the original form of entertainment. If you think about the origin of stories, we're talking like thousands of years. It goes back to cave people sitting around campfires talking. They didn't have the internet, they didn't have laptops and mobile phones, so literally the entertainment was telling stories. And even hundreds or thousands of years ago, in those stories there would be services, products, things that I guess the most basic primitive companies were doing that would be wrapped up in those stories. It's kind of inevitable that in telling those stories you would kind of have to mention things that were going on in the outside world and what various people were doing. So this goes literally back hundreds and thousands of years. And people love to tell stories really for kind of very much the same reasons that word of mouth is such a powerful marketing tool. If the story is kind of interesting and it's entertaining, it's funny, it makes them look good. So again, this links in. You can kind of start to get a feel now for how these principles are linked together. So if people want to tell stories because of the social currency that can give them, which is another one of the principles. So if a story makes them look cool, it makes them look trendy, it makes them look knowledgeable, or it's a funny story, they're going to want to tell that story to impress other people, whether it's somebody they're trying to ask out on a date at a party, or they just want to impress a family member. They want to have sort of ammunition in the form of stories that they can use to entertain other people basically in social situations. So that's why stories can be so powerful. And if you can wrap what your company is doing and your products and services up into those stories, so they have to mention them or somebody has to ask about your company and what you're doing, then that's extremely powerful, and it can get you, tremendous word of mouth leverage. So it's all about, really, in summary, with stories, just almost think about the Trojan horse thing. I'm sure you all know about the Trojan horse. It's really about sort of subtly wrapping up your products and services, almost disguising them into the narrative of that story, and then people will just start talking about your company and your brand and what you're doing without sort of even realizing that they're doing it almost. So those are the 6 principles. I mean, I hope that's been quite useful. As I said, I've only really got time in this webinar just to touch on each of them. I think to sort of run through and explain and really make you understand the whole process about how we shortlist the content ideas would probably take 5 or 6 hours. So it would be massively long. So I've just kind of touched on each of those principles, but let me just sort of end the webinar by talking about a bit about or reiterating the results that you can expect. So the system, the process is very simple. I just work with your company, I learn all about your company, and then I have like an Excel spreadsheet, basically a system where we brainstorm loads of content ideas, maybe 80, 100, maybe 150 content ideas. It's just a massive brainstorming session, and then I run each idea through a matrix of these 6 principles, and then identify basically the best short list of maybe maybe initially 10 ideas to take further and discuss. That, you know, I'm looking for the ideas where there's an obvious way that we can incorporate at least 3 of these principles, if not 4 of the 6 principles, into a single piece of content. That's the sweet spot. And then from maybe shortlisting down to 10 ideas, we would finally have a discussion maybe with other members of your team and try and get maybe 3, maybe 4 of those ideas to actually to produce the content for, which would normally be a video. So once I've done that process, which would normally take a week or 2, what are we actually expecting to happen? So because, as you can see, we've done this massive brainstorming session to get all of these amazing creative ideas, but then it's been through a very, very strict process where every piece of content is very heavily analyzed. It's cross-referenced, you know, strictly against these scientifically proven principles. Once we're all confident we have agreement on these 3 or 4 pieces of content that we want to produce, that's where, when we release them out into the public domain and start promoting them, we're basically looking, I would say, for an absolute minimum for your company of 8 times return on investment. So I say a lot of regular content. When I work with people, when a lot of the time they're not tracking it properly, when I do start tracking it properly, a lot of the time it's achieving maybe, you know, 2 times return on investment, maybe 4 times at best. We're looking to at least double that to about 8 times. Ideally, over time, as I work a bit more with your company, we would be looking for maybe between 10 and 15 times. So it's really not unrealistic if we get this right, and that takes quite a lot of work and quite a lot of back and forth between me and you. But if we get this right, you know, literally, if you spend £1,000 on promoting your content, then I would be sort of aiming possibly to get about £15,000 return on that over, you know, the course of like the next year, because we're talking about shareable content. People get, you know, content getting spread around over time. You can get a lot of that money back and more quite quickly, but it tends to be the case that, you know, you would almost, the content would start performing better after 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, a year, as it picks up, you know, it picks up kind of momentum in terms of getting talked about and shared. And you know how it works. You know, videos, for example, on YouTube can actually start accumulating more views after like a year or 18 months or 2 years than they did initially, as it gains momentum. So that's, again, that's a great thing really about this form of content, is that it just keeps going and going. It can actually, you know, be performing better 18 months after you've produced the content with me and released it out there than it was in the first 6 months. So unlike doing sort of paid advertising, it just keeps going and going and getting better and better for you. And I mean, in terms of metrics, you know, if you think about perhaps some YouTube videos that we would produce and put onto YouTube, you know, we are literally looking to get thousands and thousands of click-throughs to your website, and clicks on the call to action, you know, thousands of comments, thousands of shares. You know, we're not just talking hundreds here. We really are gunning for sort of thousands of those various forms of engagement, and certainly thousands of additional targeted visitors driven to your website, you know, within the sort of 3 months to a year of posting content once it really picks up momentum. So those are the kinds of things that we're aiming for. So I think I'm probably going to end things there. I hope you found the webinar useful. I hope it's kind of been quite inspiring. As I say, I've really just touched on each of these 6 principles, but I think there's enough kind of content during this webinar to really give you an idea of how it would work, and how I take sort of, I guess, initial, you know, brainstorming ideas and kind of really put them through the grinder and the mill and try and sort of eke out those 3 or 4 ideas that can actually do quite amazing things for your company. So, you know, what would I advise you to do next? Well, you know, this has only been kind of the basics of what I do that I've kind of ran you through in the webinar. So I'd advise, there's a button underneath the video. If you click on there, there's a short form that you can fill out, and it asks you for a bit of information about your company and what you do, and also a link to your website. So what I'm happy to do for you next is I will actually probably spend, I don't know, half an hour of my time, maybe a little bit more, having a look at your company, your website, what you're doing, having a look at your social channels and your existing content, and I'll actually email you back with some some auditing, some feedback, and actually start generating specific ideas for you and your company about pieces of content that I can start thinking about that might incorporate at least 3 of these principles. So I think watching this webinar should have been quite interesting and informative for you, but obviously none of it is related specifically to what you're doing as a business person or entrepreneur in your company and your products and services. So I'd advise you to fill in the form below, and then that's when things would really get interesting for you, because what you're going to get back from me then are some, you're going to start to get very, very specific, tailored and personalized ideas for content about what I think you should be doing. And the good thing about this is pretty quickly we might sort of touch on an idea that we're very, very confident would work. It might only take half an hour, to come up with an idea where I look at it very, very constructively and critically, and we think, yeah, this definitely, this idea, this piece of content would contain at least 3 of these principles. And if it does that, and we get the content right, and we produce it well, it's likely to get sort of massively talked about, get massive word of mouth exposure and social sharing and referrals for your business. So I guess the theory behind what I'm doing here is quite complex. There's a lot of psychology involved, but the actual way that it works and the whole process can often be very, very simplistic. I've just basically got to work with you to learn all about your business and what you're trying to do, and then we generate all of these ideas, and then I have this system of saying, okay, these are the 3 or 4 best ideas. These are the 3 or 4 ideas that we can turn not into just regular content that earns you, a nice amount of revenue, but these are the 3 or 4 ideas that are really the ones that stand above all the others, that can get you this 10 or 15 times return on investment. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you find it really useful. If you complete the form below, and then I'll aim to probably email you back with a little bit of auditing, a few ideas related specifically to your company, probably within a couple of days, if not a little bit quicker. Obviously, sometimes I'm busier than others, but I promise you, I will get back to you. I will try and help you initially for free, as much as I possibly can. I love doing this. It's so interesting for me to spend a little bit of time taking a look at companies and what they're doing. And I love kind of the thrill of brainstorming ideas, and when I come up with an idea that I think is really, really good, based on what I've kind of explained in this video, then I find it quite exciting, and I'd love to receive something from you. And if I can send you a quick email that gives you even one content idea that I think can generate huge amounts of return on investment for your company, then that's good for me, that's good for you, and hopefully we can work together. I hopefully look forward to hearing from you and speaking to you very soon. So that's it for now, and just as I say, complete the form below, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now.